14 days before Christmas, I found out that my daughter and her husband had already toured a nursing home on my behalf, put down a deposit, and never planned to tell me a single word about it, so I changed my plans. On December 25th, my daughter called me at 12:47 in the afternoon, crying so hard she could barely hold a sentence together. I told her, quiet as a Sunday morning, to look in the envelope I'd left on the workbench in the garage, the one she'd told me 100 times not to clutter up. What she found inside that envelope made her drop the phone. I heard it hit the tile floor. I heard it shatter. And then I heard nothing but silence and the sound of Christmas music playing faintly in the background of a life she no longer owned. My name is Cecil Drummond. I am 63 years old. For 38 years, I pulled wire through conduit, climbed into attics in Houston summers that would make the devil sweat, and ran electrical systems through buildings that most people in this city walk into every single day without ever knowing my name was on the permit. I wired the Galleria expansion in '98. I ran the low-voltage system for the Convention Center Annex in 2004. I built the power infrastructure for 3 hospital wings, 2 high-rise towers downtown, and a federal courthouse my own daughter drove past without once thinking about who put the lights on inside. But on the morning of December 11th, a Tuesday, I was on my hands and knees under the bathroom sink in the house I paid for, trying to stop a drip that my son-in-law Colton had been complaining about for 2 weeks straight. Before I go any further, hit that like button if you have ever given everything you had to someone who looked right through you like you were furniture. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know. The house was quiet, except for the scrape of the wrench against the corroded shut-off valve. My daughter Lydia had gone to her spin class. Colton had left for what he called a client breakfast, though I'd noticed those happened 3 or 4 times a week now and always left him jumpy and distracted when he got home. My grandson Jasper was upstairs asleep. He was 9 years old. He had his mother's eyes and his grandmother Ruth's stubborn streak, which meant I already trusted him more than I trusted either of his parents combined. I was tightening the compression fitting when I heard the back door open. I went still. Colton's voice came down the hall first, tight and clipped, the way it got when he was performing for someone on the phone. "No, I told you it's handled," he was saying. "The property appraised higher than we expected. By spring we'll have the liquidity." A pause, then lower. "The old man doesn't know anything. He thinks he's here because we need him. He doesn't know we need the house." I set the wrench down. He kept talking. "Lydia's on board. She just needs a little more time. But we've been looking at Meadowbrook. It's 45 minutes out. But no, he'll adjust. They all adjust eventually." Meadowbrook Comfort Care. I knew that name. Everyone in our part of Katy knew it. A low-budget facility out near the Brazos Bottoms that smelled like boiled carrots and gave off the particular quiet of a place where people went to be forgotten. 3 years before, a deacon from our church had gone in for what his family called a short-term transition. He died 8 months later. His daughter never visited once. I lay on the cold bathroom tile for a long time after Colton hung up and walked back out the same way he came in. I stared at the underside of the sink cabinet. There was a pencil mark there, faded but visible, where my wife Ruth had measured for the pipes when we were building this house. She had insisted on doing it herself. She said she didn't trust anyone else to get it level. Ruth had been gone 4 years. I pressed my hand against her pencil mark and I breathed. Then I sat up. I turned off the drip. I washed my hands. And I thought about the man I used to be before grief made me polite and love made me small. Because the man I used to be, the one who ran circuits that carried enough voltage to stop a heart, that man did not get quietly driven to a facility near the Brazos Bottoms and left there like a checked coat at a restaurant. That man knew exactly how to cut the power to the whole building before anyone realized the lights were going out. On day 11 before Christmas, the performance cracked right down the middle at the kitchen counter. Colton came in that evening with his chest out, that particular posture he had when he'd talked himself into something stupid, and set a stack of brochures next to where I was eating my soup. Meadowbrook Comfort Care, color photos, a woman in a wheelchair smiling at a bird feeder. The logo was a green leaf. "We thought maybe you'd want to have a look," Colton said, his voice carrying that careful warmth he used for things he'd already decided. I looked at my daughter. She was at the stove with her back to me. "I don't need a care facility," I said. Colton tilted his head, patient and thin. "You've been struggling, Cecil, forgetting things, getting confused about the schedule." He'd never once called me Dad. Not in 6 years, and my folks are coming from Denver on the 22nd. They're traditional people. Having an older family member in the house, it sends a certain message to them. "What message?" He smiled, "That we're not as established as we've worked to be." I nodded slowly. I let my eyes go soft. I let my shoulders drop just enough. "I'll think about it," I said. He set the brochures closer to me, offering managing. I said goodnight. I went to my room and I pulled out my phone. Baxter Gilmore had been my attorney since 1997. He was 71, semi-retired, and sharp as a box cutter. He answered on the third ring. "Pull the deed records for 4419 Clearfield Drive," I said. "Tell me if anything's been filed against the property in the last 18 months. He called me back at 7:14 in the morning. "Nothing's executed yet," he said. "But there's a pre-application with a private lender. $280,000. Collateral is the Clearfield property." A pause. "Your name is on the application, Cecil. The signature line is blank." They needed me to sign. That's why I was still in the house instead of already at Meadowbrook. They needed one more piece of paper. I thanked Baxter and told him to stay close to his phone. Then I walked downstairs, made a pot of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table looking out at the backyard I had landscaped with my own hands. The fig tree I'd planted the year Jasper was born. The flagstone path Ruth and I had set piece by piece one summer weekend, both of us on our knees in the Texas heat, laughing about nothing in particular. I looked at all of it, and I felt the last of my patience leave my body like smoke from a blown fuse. On day 9 before Christmas, the humiliation moved from private to public. Colton's colleague, a man named Webb, some kind of junior associate, came for what Colton called a casual dinner. As I walked through the living room, Colton said without breaking stride toward the front door, "Cecil, why don't you eat in the kitchen tonight? Webb knows the situation at the office and it'd just be easier." I looked at my daughter. She was adjusting a throw pillow. She did not look at me. I ate in the kitchen. Through the wall, I heard Webb ask what the house had appraised for. I heard Colton give a number $60,000 higher than reality. I heard Lydia laugh, that bright, performed laugh she used when she was frightened. After Webb left, I put my dishes in the sink. Colton was leaning on the counter with a glass of wine. He looked at me with the expression of a man who had just successfully managed a liability. "Thanks for being flexible," he said. Flexible, as if the man who had wired the building where Colton paid rent every month had done them a personal courtesy by eating alone in his own kitchen. "Of course," I said. I went to my room. I took out a notebook. I started making a list. On day 8, I drove out to Meadowbrook by myself. I didn't call ahead. I parked and looked at the building. Single story, the color of old bone, a chain-link fence, a burned-out bulb in the O of the sign. I'd have noticed that bulb even if I weren't an electrician. Inside, the smell hit me before my eyes adjusted. Industrial cleaner and something underneath it. Sweet and wrong, the smell of a place losing its battle with time. In room 7, an old man sat facing a window that looked out on a concrete block wall. He had a blanket someone had placed on his lap. He hadn't moved it. In the common room, 6 residents sat at tables with the remnants of a craft project, paper chains. A staff member was on her phone in the corner. No one was talking. The television was tuned mostly to static. This was where my daughter planned to leave me. Not temporarily. Not for an evaluation. She was going to drive me here before the Crane family arrived for Christmas, hand me to this place like luggage, and go home to host dinner in my house and pretend I had simply stopped existing. I stood in the parking lot in the thin December sun and called Baxter from the car. "You remember Lone Star Electrical Partners?" I asked. Silence on the line, longer this time. Lone Star Electrical Partners was a commercial electrical contracting company founded in Houston in 1991 by 3 men who were tired of being shut out of the city's big construction bids because of who they were. We pooled what we had. We kept our names off the masthead because we knew how quickly certain contracts evaporate when the wrong people find out who's holding them. For 30 years, Lone Star had wired a significant portion of commercial Houston. I owned 22% of the company. My name appeared nowhere on the website, nowhere in any press release, nowhere that Colton could have found it even if he'd thought to look, which he never had, because Colton had never once asked me a single question about my life before I became his wife's father. "The board will move fast," I told Baxter. "I want the deed transferred before December 23rd, immediate possession clause, and I want demolition permitted for noon on the 24th. "Cecil, that's Christmas Eve." "I know what day it is," I said. On day 6, they came for the paper. Lydia sat me down at the dining table on a Sunday morning, folder in front of her, hands folded on top, the way she used to fold them over her homework when she was 12 and had done something wrong and was hoping I wouldn't notice. Colton was conveniently upstairs. "Daddy," she said, "we need to update your healthcare documents, just a precaution." She slid the folder toward me. I opened it. Dense legal language, but I had spent decades around contracts, durable power of attorney. This document would give her and Colton control over my bank accounts, my investment accounts, and any real property in my name. "This is a power of attorney," I said. "It's a combined document, healthcare directive included." She had her palm flat over the second page. I looked at my daughter. At the woman Ruth and I had driven to swim meets at 5 in the morning, helped move into 3 apartments, watched walk down an aisle toward a man neither of us fully trusted. I looked for the girl who used to fall asleep against my shoulder on long drives. I found a stranger holding a pen. "Let me get my reading glasses," I said. She flinched, just barely. "You don't need them, Daddy. It's standard language. Sign the last page. We have to mail it today." I took the pen. My hand trembled, not from age. From the effort of keeping 4 months of cold rage below the surface, I pressed the pen to the signature line and I wrote, "Not my name." A long, looping, deliberate scrawl that looked, at a glance, like the signature of a man whose hands weren't quite working right. But if you traced it carefully, if you looked at what the loops actually spelled, it did not say Cecil Drummond. It said, "I know what this is." She glanced at it, closed the folder, held it to her chest, smiled. "That's perfect, Daddy." She was texting Colton before she reached the hallway. I heard her say, voice fading, "He signed it. We're good." I called Baxter. "Move on the property," I said. "Make sure anyone who reviews that signature checks it against my legal records." "It won't match," he said. "That's exactly right," I said. On day 4, they moved me to the garage. Colton came in the morning, easy smile, coffee in hand, and explained that his parents needed a proper guest room and that the garage would only be for a couple nights. He seemed to think the space heater made it reasonable. Temperatures in Katy in December dropped to the low 40s at night. He did not seem to find this worth mentioning. I looked at Lydia. She had a measuring tape. She was already measuring the wall where my dresser stood. "The garage is fine," I said. I took 3 things: the original deed, sealed in the waterproof sleeve I'd kept behind a drop sailing panel in my closet for 15 years, my passport, the photo album from the year Ruth and I broke ground, the 2 of us with dirt on our hands and the Houston skyline small in the distance behind us, both of us laughing about something I can't remember anymore, but that felt in that moment like the only thing in the world. I was on the folding cot between the riding mower and the storage shelves when I heard it. I went to the small garage window and looked out at the driveway. Colton was dragging Ruth's rocking chair to the curb. Her father had made it by hand, white oak, carved, a cushion she'd reupholstered herself 3 different times across 40 years. It had been in our bedroom. After she died, I'd moved it to the living room because I couldn't stand to look at it and couldn't stand to look away. Colton dragged it across the concrete without lifting it. One of the rocker rails caught on the edge of the driveway and cracked with a sound I felt in my back teeth. He left it tilted against the mailbox like garbage and went back inside. I stood at that window for a long time. Then I picked up my phone. I called Baxter. I said, "Noon on the 24th. Don't be late." 2 days before Christmas, the people Colton owed money came to collect. Early morning, a truck idled at the curb. The knock at the door wasn't a delivery knock. Colton's shadow moved fast behind the frosted glass of the front door, and then he scrambled to the garage, face gray, pajamas on. "There's someone at the door," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Tell them nobody by that name lives here anymore. Tell them they have the wrong address." "Why can't you answer your own door?" "Because they know my face." I walked to the front and opened it. The man on the porch was broad-shouldered, shaved head, canvas jacket not chosen for warmth. He looked me over the way men like that always do. Quick calculation, deciding what I was worth. "Here for Colton," he said. "Colton doesn't live here," I said. "This property transferred to a development company last week. Anyone who was residing here has 30 days to retrieve personal effects. If whoever sent you holds a note on this property, they're welcome to contact Baxter Gilmore at Gilmore Legal Associates. He handles the property now." The man stared at me. I stared back. I had spent 38 years on job sites with men twice his size and half his patience. I was not moved. He made a call, repeated what I'd said almost word for word, hung up, stepped back. "We'll be in touch," he said. "I'd expect so," I said. I closed the door. Colton was by the water heater when I got back to the garage, trying to look like a man who hadn't just hidden behind his father-in-law. "What did you say?" he asked. "I told them you'd moved," I said. "You should use the time you have left wisely." He looked at me for a long moment, trying to figure out if he'd just been helped or handled. He hadn't figured it out yet. On Christmas Eve, I was up at 4. The garage was cold. I didn't feel it. I changed into the clothes I'd kept sealed in a dry bag at the bottom of my tool chest. A charcoal suit I'd bought for a Lone Star board meeting in 2019, still sharp white shirt, a deep blue tie the color of a clear Texas December sky. Oxfords my father had shined the day before I started my first apprenticeship. His Hamilton Cocky field watch on my wrist, nothing flashy, but precise the way good work is precise. I put the photo album in a canvas satchel. I put the deed beside it. I placed a sealed envelope on the workbench, leaning against a coffee can full of screws where it would be found. It was addressed to Lydia in my handwriting. "Open this when you have nothing left to lose." Then I walked out of the garage and did not look back. My old friend Darnell, who had been at Lone Star since the beginning, was idling at the curb in a black Suburban. He'd worked beside me since we were both 30 years old and had nothing but the skills in our hands and the sense to bet on each other. He saw me in the suit, He gave me one nod, the nod of a man who understands what a suit on a morning like this means. Airport, I said, but stop at the op on Highway 6, I want pancakes. He smiled. He drove. The night before I'd left, Jasper had come to the garage at 10. 2 quiet knocks, our signal. He had his mother's old flashlight and a thermos of soup he'd told Lydia he needed for himself. He sat on an overturned bucket while I ate. We talked about his science project, a small LED array he'd wired himself with a kit I'd given him last birthday. He had a real instinct for it. I told him so. Before he left, I gave him a business card from my jacket pocket. 1 phone number, my name. On the back, in my handwriting, call when you're ready. Everything else follows. What does it mean? He asked. It means you're taken care of, I said. It means I know who you are. He hugged me the way kids do when something is ending, but they don't have the words for it yet. I held on a little longer than I needed to. He smelled like soap and the particular hopefulness of 9 years old. Whatever happens, I told him, you remember I left because I had to, not because I wanted to leave you. He nodded into my shoulder. Go on, I said gently. He slipped out, the door closed. I finished packing. At 12:47 on Christmas Day, my daughter called. I answered. She was crying, not the panic cry from the morning when the legal notices had arrived, when the deed transfer had been confirmed, and the power of attorney had been flagged as fraudulent, and Colton had been served with a criminal complaint for attempted identity fraud. This was the other kind of crying, the kind that means something is actually getting through. Daddy, she said, there's an envelope on the workbench. Open it, I said. I heard paper tearing. The envelope held one document, a bank statement for a secondary account held in Colton's name alone. For the past 16 months, he'd been quietly transferring money from their shared household account into it, including a portion of my pension payments he'd redirected when he helped me set up autopay for the utilities. The withdrawals from his private account were irregular, large, the financial fingerprint of someone paying off a debt in pieces. A gambling debt, it turned out. Private poker tables, the kind that start as recreation and end as a lien on your father-in-law's house. Lydia had not known a word of it. She found out the way she found out about the house and the nursing home deposit and the forged documents, all at once, alone on Christmas morning, reading a piece of paper her father had left for her in a garage where he used to sleep. I let her cry for a while, not because I was cruel, because some things cannot be shortened without being lost. Daddy, she said finally, I didn't know about the money, I didn't know any of it. I know you didn't know about the money, I said, but you knew about the garage. Silence. You knew about Meadowbrook, I said, and you knew I raised you better than that. More silence. Where are you? She asked. I'm somewhere warm, I said. I'm doing fine. The house is yours until January 23rd. Take what matters, I paused. There's an account in Jasper's name. Baxter has the details. It'll be available to him at 18. Not before and not through you or Colton, his. She breathed, in and out, long and slow. Okay, she said. Take care of him, I said. That's the only thing I'm asking. We stayed on the line a moment longer without saying anything. I could hear the house, the refrigerator hum, the heater cycling, all the sounds I'd listened to for 4 years in that place, growing smaller and quieter by the month. Merry Christmas, Lydia, I said. I hung up. Outside the window of the small house I'd rented in Rockport, 2 hours south of Houston, the place Ruth and I had talked about retiring to for 20 years, the Gulf stretched out flat and turquoise and indifferent to the season. A pelican coasted past on the wind without working for it. I had the photo album on the side table. I had my father's watch on my wrist. I had a lighting project, half designed on a legal pad on the kitchen counter. A custom rig for the back porch, something I was drawing from scratch, just for the pleasure of doing it right. Jasper had my card. One day he would call. When he did, I would answer, and whatever he needed would be there, because I had spent a lifetime building things that lasted. The truest thing I ever built wasn't wired into any wall or anchored into any foundation. It was a door that only he could open. The pelican banked hard on a gust and disappeared over the water. The light on the Gulf turned gold in the early afternoon. I picked up my father's watch and checked the time. Then I set it down, and for the first time in longer than I could measure, I didn't need to be anywhere at all.